shouldn't take too long for the stream to actually hit Twitch here. Oh no, I pressed the wrong button. Alright, so we are now streaming. I guess I'll tell the world about it. I'm not going to do code today. Talk about that in a second. Streaming, game dev, hashtag game dev to be fancy. Making spaceship. Making a spaceship. So, I do need to... Excuse me. I do need to work on the context engine, but as you might be able to hear, I didn't get any sleep last night. It's been miserable. So, I don't have the brains to do any coding. What we're going to do today is build another spaceship, because it's been a while, and I need to keep my spaceship juices flowing. So we're going to sketch one up, and then we're going to put it into Blender. Now, in order to make yourself a spaceship, what you need to do is to come up with a good design, and that partially involves constraints. Constraints are always a factor, but when you're doing a video game, there are a lot of constraints that you need to worry about in your game. Not just things like shape language, but things like fundamental game requirements. And in my case, the fundamental game requirement is that we've got these modular setups where every system you put into the ship doesn't show up as a unique element on the ship. If you install, fuel tanks, they're not going to show up as specifically fuel tanks, but instead it will extend the engine segment a couple more sections. So because of that, the ship we've got now, which I guess I should just pull up so we can take a look. I might as well go into shipbuilding. I wonder whether shipbuilding even still works. It's been quite a while. Here's an example. This is a short haul freighter that I've been using just as a basic idea. Oh, I can't press play mode due to the travesty of the code base, but this is what a specific version of that ship looks like. And you can see that if we were to go into scene view here, why is scene view over there? Scene view here. And go down to the ship, which would be probably down here. Yeah, there it is. What we've got is a ship that's core is mostly just this cargo frame, and then the front windows here. And that's the core of the ship, plus like a pylon in the middle, strut in the middle. Everything else is a repeated element that gets added in as the system gets polished. So here's the command elements, and as we get more command, those get longer and more beefy. And here are the support elements. As we get more supports, these get longer and more beefy. Yeah, that's correct. And then here are the engine elements. These grow out as we get more engine components. This is, of course, the engine pylon itself, which is part of the core frame. So the core frame is this pylon, this cargo, and this head. And you can see the basic idea, how they both lever outwards to make room for the components we're putting in. But this does have quite a few possibilities that I didn't bother to explore here in this particular ship design. So what I want to do is try a couple of other ship designs. There is already a burgeoning space language, shape language for the spaceships. So we do have to be constrained by that, but it's far more important that we're constrained by the idea of a repeating element. And so we'll just do a couple of quick little sketches just to kind of warm up and see if I can get my brain working in any regard. So the current ship looks something like this, right? It's like a frame window, and then there is a cargo frame like this, and then there is an engine frame out here. And then in the middle, we get repeating elements like that. And that's a pretty simple little sketch. It also looks like crap, but just to show you the sort of thing that it looks like. So if we were going to build a different ship, we might want to add in some warp capabilities, which is a ring like this. In our shape language, this is just what warp drives look like in our game. And I also want to have some vectored engines. I want to have some heavy vectored engines. Now, the problem with the heavy vectored engines is that there's a twofold problem. The first is that if the ship, so let's say that we've got a heavy vectored engine, something like this, right? And there it is pointed down, and then we've got a ship, right? And then here's another heavy vectored engine pointing down. And in theory, you can rotate these however you want to move your ship around and stuff. But one of the issues is that that can't really be modularly expanded on. It's really hard to figure out how to make modules that fit onto that engine without making it look dumb. So your engine modules would have to be something else, or they could be like an endless array of those, I suppose. The other problem is that if we've got a ring, like a warp ring, your engines are going to have to either fit inside of it or fit outside of it, or there's going to have to be a complete break in the ring. Like this part of the ring will have to be missing. We could have like the engines extend to outside the ring, but that would require, if they're outside the ring, you can't warp with them. The warp ring is not, you can't go very much past that in our fiction. So if we have a warp ring, we can't have the engines float outside of it during warp, but we could have them extend outside of it during warp, which would give us like a front profile that sort of looks like this, right? Where you've got the engines here, and then they actually go in significantly further, but they actually embed into the ship, right? And then when you are maneuvering, they can pop out and actually be, out here somewhere. But the amount they have to move is quite a bit. It's like a full engine length or more, which gives it a really long neck like this, which is probably not going to feel right. I don't really know what I guess I could add in like really, really heavy bracing elements. So that instead of being out on a pin like that, they're out on some heavy brace, and then the heavy brace can pull them in. So instead of being, let's think, if we're still looking from the front here, I'm just using a box as our cockpit area. If we have heavy braces bringing them in, the easiest thing to do would be to bring them in down below or up above with the heavy braces, just levering them out. The problem is that creates off-center thrust, but we could try and mitigate that by having the rear engines also shift a little bit so that they remain balanced. Let's just explore that idea a little bit. So if we normally look something like this from the front, let's just switch this around. We're now looking at it from the back, okay? Which means that we would have two engines here, right? Or something like this. And then when they lever out to be outside of the frame, it sounds like the nightmare is beginning again. It sounds like they might be doing some work on my roof. The land company, that's not really a landlord or a landlady, has a bunch of guys up there, and they are really loud. Also, they keep blocking my door. Right, so if we bring this up, we could have it be outside the frame like this, right? We could put a hole in the frame just at the edge like this, just to limit it a little bit. So if we put this out like this, what we could do is we could make it so that the engine on the chassis levered down to be equal to it, so that we would end up with a balanced thrust element rather than the offset thrust elements, which would mean that we would need a way to move these down, and it would make sense for that to be part of the engine's levering mechanism in the first place. So when these things are up, the engine is up, and when these things are out, the engine is down. And so if we were to look at that from the top, or from a 3/4 view like this, for example, and we might think that when the engines are up, they're like here, right? And then when the engines get levered out, this could be our lever element. and it's connected to these engines. And so basically we've got a whole strut, a whole beam, and then like a gap of some kind. It might not be a real gap. It might be like just whole segments that get out of the way or whatever. Something like this, right? And then this is a lever which brings down these engines to here, and then we've got like a chip out of this which makes room for the rotational engines, the vector engines. But I don't really like how this is starting to feel. I might try and do it another way. I really do like the idea of rotational engines, but the problem is that the way that they spin will end up burning through any warp coil that I put onto the ship, unless I can just do it the other way around. Let's do it the other way around. The warp ring is what extends rather than the engines. So we've got rotatable engines on the chassis of the ship. And then we've got a warp ring, which only extends when we are ready to warp. So something like this. Which can be levered to, just to retract into the ship and provide a provide a locked-in state. I'm sort of thinking that I want this to... The whole point of the rotatable engines here is that it's maneuverable and it's able to land on places with gravity wells, but having wings doesn't really fit into having a warp system. There might be later on I might get good enough at designing these things that I can have wings that turn into warp foils. But for now, that's not going to be the case. So if we think about it like this, then what we've got is like a main engine here that can rotate to provide, 360 vectored thrust. And then some kind of heavy brace beam, a heavy brace hull element. And then we've got some engines back here. These are the engines that will be expanded modularly based on the engine components we add in. And then we've got a hull strut, which we can fold the beams back along the engines like this. And then fold this one as well, so it's like... Can I do it 90 like this? Yeah, I can. It'll be a little bit awkward because I don't full forward the same amount, but I think it'll work fine. And when they're folded down, well, they still have to be within the framework because I'm not changing their horizontal. I have to have it come out horizontally rather than vertically. So we'll just go ahead and flip that so that instead of being the way they were, they're instead framed like this, as elements like this, so they can flip out instead of flipping. It's better if it's like this. And in this way they can flip out instead of flipping up. And that should allow it to have a flipped out version that that works. And we'll just have it come forward on the strut like this so that they can connect a little bit. And not like perfectly, but just connect some. And then what we'll do is we'll have the section that folds out for the supply elements, or sorry, for the support elements. And then we'll have the command section. And I think that what we'll do is we'll do it the same way as the ship we've got now, where the command section is an exterior set, or one or the other is an exterior set, and then it comes forward into some kind of cockpity area. But this is off-center. We're going to have to move the engine framing substantially forward, I think. It's a little too far back there to be believable. So if we fold these out, what we want it to look like is, so here is the, no, wrong pencil. Here is the main frame here, the core body. The engine's going to be right at the front of the core body, because otherwise it'll be really lopsided. And then here are the additional engines. And then what we have is these folded out So what that'll be is it'll be a frame here and a frame here, and then they will loop. So let's just draw in the loop first so I don't get confused. It's a loop like this. And then this is the split here and here. We can probably make that juicier, like make it circular so that it kind of cups the engine, see? So that the front of the engine kind of pokes through there. And we'll do the same on this side so that there's a engine coming through here. And then, of course, we've got the rest of the ship. That's a really, really far forward warp element, though. I think it would be better if it was... Well, putting it behind the engine is a bad idea, but we could put it like directly on top of the engine without any difficulty. So I think that's probably the best option, to put it directly on top of our engines like this, so that it almost looks like they share one pivot point. And then the ring, of course, has some stuff on it, the warp elements, and then there's a warp drive beneath, something like that, right? Now I'm a little unsure as to how the front of the ship should look, the cockpit. I've just kind of been scribbling. So let's go ahead and do a couple of sketches on that. So if we've got a ring like this, we know that there is a cut down the middle because they're split into two pieces that are going to fold away from us backwards into the paper here. And we've got engines right here at the middle point, and these are vectored engines that are hinged. They're on a rotary mount right here. And I guess we're looking at it from behind at the moment. So we've got some additional engines here, which are the modular engines that get added in. And I think that it would be better if there were 4 of them rather than 2 of them, something like this. You know what? I'm thinking about how it would work modularly, and I think it would work best if there were 4 in this pattern instead, for reasons that will become obvious later. So if we have this as the setup here, and then what we do is we have a core body shape that mostly hides these joints. And then there's a warp element down here that actually provides the warp propulsion, which is shaped by some standouts out here. This hoop comes in and falls behind the joint of the engine and connects the warp elements. I think that's a good way to do it because that gives the warp elements extra joisting. And then we can bring down like a beam here if we need more struts, or we can have it be like a whoosh sort of shape. I think that might be pretty cool. What do you think, having a little whoosh sort of shape here? To be honest, we don't even need this outer ring if we're going to do it like this. We can just leave it like this and give us this strange broken circle. We could do this. We need the shape there, because that's the outer limit of where the engines can fall. But I think that will add a lot of personality to this and give it kind of a weird sinuous shape. If it's going to have a weird sinuous shape, though, it should have a weird sinuous shape throughout. So let's see if we can add some weird sinuous stuff to the nature of the cockpit and the support elements. In the cargo ship we use now, this one, what we've got are the command elements are outside and the support elements are on the inside. That's, in my opinion, a bad way to do it. I don't know what idiot sculpted that, but what we'll do is we'll do it the opposite way. So we'll have all of the hab areas on the inside of the neck of the ship. The problem is that we probably don't really want a super long neck. So what we'll do is we'll do a double up, which is where we have modules that overlap. So if you have 3 system points, this would be if it was singled, right? With a double up, we could do something like this and then this, but between them would be a module that's like this. And in that way, what we get is a compression of space, about 50% savings, depending on which way we place it. And that will allow us to have a much shorter neck without splitting it into multiple rows as much. But what I think we'll do is we'll have a cockpit of some kind up here. Here's our cockpit. I don't know what it looks like yet. And then we will have to have a habitation coil like this with add-ons. So something like this. And that's the sort of shape that we're going to have. Now, depending on how we want to do this, we can have that be one core shape, but that would get pretty long on larger ships, or on, not larger, but more advanced ships. So I think what we'll do is we will have this split into 4 rather than just a solo, something like this with the same sort of setup, just rotated 90 degrees. Do you see that? So if we're going to do that, then that's all well and good, but what we need is to know what sort of window shapes we're getting out of this, and I think that it's obvious that they would have to be like this, and these elements up here could be more bubbles. If we make them into bubbles, then what they end up with is a very aggressive repeated shape, so it makes probably better sense if rather than a bubbles for each one, they are an overall raised element like this with a window shape in here, right? Now these are going to be quite small in terms of what we're actually looking at. If we were to put people in here, the shape would be, here would be the hull like this. Here would be the window that we can actually look out of. It's actually a little lower than that. It's like this. And then here would be the element on top, which would be like this. And there would be the bubble. And what we would probably see is, people this size. Because this is not a big ship. It's going to be a very small, maneuverable warp ship. A courier sort of setup. So if we think about it like that, then what we've got up here is, what is it? Well, I think that it's better if it's actually just a raised ceiling without actually being a separate walking path. Now, since there are no strict interiors here, we can do whatever we want. But I like the idea of this is just more airspace. And what we'll do is we'll add in some piping elements or something to make it feel more connected to the area down here. Something to make it have a little bit of density to it and connectivity to it. Problem is that this roof is going to be a roof, so that's okay. We don't have actual transparent glass, so we can fake it from this angle. This is what good comes from knowing how the ship visuals work, is we can cheat it by just reminding ourselves of the constraints of our engine. If we can't see it within our engine, we don't have to explain it. But since what we're going to have is a 4 set, so if we have here, this is going to be one of our setups, right? So it's like this. We have another one down here, probably without exactly touching, but something like down here. And these can be different lengths. And then we've got more out to the side like this. So with that in mind, the core cockpit area, what's it going to look like? We've got 2 options. One option is that we can have this be large enough to contain the entire set. Another option is we can do what we did here with this, and you can see how what we've got here is half of a cockpit. And if we had enough command modules, what you would see is this front element get duplicated and flipped. So if I were to grab this and flip it, see? It's built specifically to line up. So if we had enough command inputs, we would get that second set. However, this approach is a 2 set rather than a 4 set. It looks like a 4 set because there's 4 columns, 1, 2, and then down below 3, 4. But that's an illusion. These are not 2 different columns. These are 1 column that happens to be split down the middle. So that is what we're doing there, and it works pretty well for a 2 set. But for a set like this, it's a little bit more complicated. We could split it up into quarters, in which case we would have to have a hull that's shaped like this, a front command module that's shaped like this. But I've tried that a couple of times. It's never really worked out. I think that we're going to have to go with an all-4 connection setup. So in that case, we're going to have a fairly wide and tall front end. We can make it like properly wedge-shaped, but we don't want to. We've got this sinuous curve here. So what we actually want to do is come up with offsets that make this front command center look kind of interesting. We have to do that without accidentally making it look like a penis, because that's what ships tend to look like when you try and do offsets. So here is our outer ring, right? Roughly. And here is our vectored engines here. And we got manger hull back here. And then what have we got up front? Well, I mean, if we're going to mirror this exact same move, then we've got something like this. Maybe just a little bit too penisy. But what if we were to, instead of making the whole thing a straight shot like this, what if we were to tilt the command system? Well, I don't know. I don't think that fits very well into the setup we've got. Another option is we could go with the opposite tilt, which would give us a wide open top here, which could look pretty good. So if we were to do that, then we would have beams like this. And the support beams, we could put them on top, making our ship tall. We could put them out to the side, but we've already got some stuff out to the side. So I think that our support, if our support is going to be on top, it's going to have to be a double split in the same way that it is for the command module in the existing ship, which would block our windows pretty bad. Another option is that our support system could be set up as ring structures rather than as solid modules, in which case we could get away with some interesting stuff. We could also put them back here. If we put them back here, that'll be an advantage because it will allow us more freedom as to where to put our engines. So if we have an engine set up back here, if we did that, we'd have, a 4-way engine split, something like this, with add-on modules, something like this. And then our support modules could actually be right here on our core body frame. And if they fall off the back of our core body frame, that's fine. There's no problem with that. We'll put them on the top and on the bottom, like so. I think that's going to work. The question is what our cockpit's going to look like. This long neck is too long, so I think we're going to have to go with the idea that a lot of this is going to be recessed into a protected region here on this frame of the ship here. So instead of being that far out, it's going to be partially protected by the hull of the ship here. That way most of it is inside the frame of the ship. I don't have to worry about it getting too long. Something like that, right? And if we do that, then it makes sense for us to have a head that fits into that same shape slot. In which case, what we're going to do is have a shape like this. And how are we going to make that feel not quite so... well, I guess we're going to have to accept some level of silliness from it. But if we give it... if we give it a unique set of cut-ins or something, we can probably help some. So let's think. How about if we bring it in? And maybe that makes it worse. I don't know. It's fine. So if we do something like this, then what we can end up with is let's just try a couple more shapes here. I think that we're gonna have to have this kind of connectivity here, but we can always morph it a little bit. And the way to morph it in this case would be to add in some side bracing, I think, something like this as part of the core element of the ship. And then over here we can add in a slot to accept that side bracing, like so. So as it retracts, it can actually slot in, but until it retracts, well, maybe it's not even, maybe it's just like an over under thing, so that we've got something else reaching out for it, like this. And that'll help to break it up a little bit. And then we'll want to have enough room for people. So people are about this high. Hey! And that means that if we have like cockpit areas, we'll want them to be aligned with that kind of size, right? So the bridge is going to be 2 or 3 decks. Probably 3. 3 would make more sense. So if we do that, then we've got one upper area here. It's not really the bridge, it's just the shared area. It's got the bridge and other stuff in it. And then we can try and create an echo of this same shape. That's what I'm trying to figure out the best way to do here. And I think that the way to do it is to add in like a really heavy set of elements here. I haven't decided exactly what they should be, though. Maybe it's something more like this. Maybe I'll have to play around with it in the 3D engine to figure out what it should be. So then we've got a second set of windows here. And then we got a third set of windows here. And I think that will work out. Now it looks more like somebody wearing a Silence of the Lambs mask. So we'll have to reshape those windows. Those are just indicators rather than anything else. Obviously, I've changed it so that it's now from the side. So I've got most of the ship from 3/4, and then the cockpit is from the side. But the basic idea is sound. So let's get to modeling it. I'm going to pull it off my screen. You won't be able to see it anymore, but I'll still be able to see it. I could also import it into Blender, but it's so basic that I don't think we need it. It's pretty primitive stuff. All right, so here we are in Blender, or as we like to call it here in the States, the oldest fuck version of Blender. Because the new version still doesn't have automatic FBX export into Unity, which is kind of important for me. So we're going to go ahead and start with the engines. We got a light source here just to make sure that we're set up to be able to see something. Go ahead and make this a sun. And then if we look at it from the front, I'm going to rotate this so we can see it from the front. There we are. That'll just help us a little bit in trying to see things in terms of lights and shadows. We're going to create a roughly exact opposite one, which is going to be blue and not very bright. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and frame our spaceship engines. We have to create a size that we can get along with. Here in the game world, the unit size is not meters, it's something else. But if we take a look at this, all of these are 1 by 1. If we open up the correct meshes, is this in? It's in Puffer. Sorry, I'm burping up a storm. So what happens when I don't get any sleep? My stomach gets rumbly. Here we are. So in this ship, what we've got are these elements here, which are almost one by one, I believe. Let's just double check that. So if I were to pull it out and take a look. Yeah, one by one by one. So one by one is a deck. So that's the kind of shape that we got to keep in mind when we're working on this stuff. So before we start too much on the rotors, we'll put in just a placeholder using some cylinders, and we will work on that later to see whether or not, because it's a bad idea to get too detailed before you actually know what the ratios are going to be. But we're going to want to add a mirror modifier for this, and those are going to be our engines. There we are. And just to make sure that I know that there are engines, we'll extrude and shrink. And there, we got engines. Exciting stuff, right? So we're going to need to do the idea of how big these decks are. So let's go ahead and create a placeholder for our command deck. So this is 2 by 2. So if we shrink it down, it is now 1 by 1 by, I think, 1. And let's just take a look. Yeah. So with that in mind, this can easily become the thing we need. So we're going to go ahead, apply rotation scale, okay, there we are. And these are going to be command elements, command deck elements. We can delete half of them. They're just, we don't need the left half here. Just, no, it's got too many pieces to do it that way. Let's do it another way then. There we are, deleted. And we'll do the details of it later. Mirror, there we go. So with this in mind, that's going to be our command module placeholder. And so we'll put one of them up here, and then one of them here, and then one of them here. And that is 3 decks high. But the truth is these aren't actually going to be offset by a whole unit. So we're going to go ahead and bring those back down 0.25. There we are. Put half a unit between them. And the reason for that is simple. If we wanted to create a middle deck, that's what we want. We don't want them to overlap or touch. So this is what the command set actually looks like. This is a command set right here. We're not going to have them all lined up like this. We're going to have them staggered due to the way that they retreat into the core of the ship. But let's go ahead and create the core of the ship. So we're going to create a circle. We'll just go ahead and make it a 64. There we are. And then we'll scale it up by 2, rotate it by X. What do you think, 60? Yeah, 60 looks good. We'll pull it forward. And you can see how that's going to end up sort of enfolding those elements. But it's much too large, so we're going to shrink it. It's actually not much too large because these are half of the setup, aren't they? The other half is a window boost, which would be roughly that large, right? So we don't want to shrink it below the window size, and you can see how that's actually pretty close. So that's going to be the shape of our hull here. There's our core hull set up for us. It doesn't have any of the bulge that we're going to want, but let's go ahead and put that bulge in now. There we go. We're also going to be putting in some modules for, some repeating modules for our systems, our support systems. To do that, we'll just grab the frame that we need here. So we're going to want these guys. Yeah, that might not be enough. That's probably good there. We'll shrink those away, and then what we'll do is we'll extrude and shrink on the z-axis here. Extrude down. Extrude down. There we are. Shrink it on the y-axis. Get rid of these lonely faces. We don't need these guys on the back here. Can I just... I hate this part because it's so annoying to try and select one of these errant elements. I really wish Blender had more selection options. Like there should be a way to extend my selection along the same lines. If I try and extend it, I get that, which isn't what I want. There we are. So that's what we've got for our ship. Only problem with this is that we've ruined the shape of the core of the coil. No biggie. What we'll do is we'll just bring this back here, and that's the same shape. And so what we'll do is we'll just merge all the doubles. And so we've restored this part here that I was so annoyed by, but this time that part is actually not a core element, so I can reframe it and work with it later, and I know where everything is supposed to line up. It's unfortunate, but I appear to have damaged some stuff. Let's go ahead and just undo a lot of that. I did too much damage to it. Let's hope that I have enough undos. I don't. There we are. So we're going to go ahead and redo all of that work. There we are. This time when we extend, what we don't want to do is... I don't even know if this is possible. You know what? There, that'll help. So let's grab some faces here. Is that even? I think that's even. Yeah, 4 on each side. Alright, so now that we've grabbed them, we'll deselect the parts we need to deselect, like so. Then we'll extrude, like so. Yeah. And what we'll do is, let's just extrude a little bit there, like that. And what we'll do is we will actually map these elements together. So delete these. Oh, I deleted one too many verts. Gosh, this is really not good at this particular operation. There we go. And what we'll do is we'll just manually merge these elements together. Let's start with the middle one. Merge at last. We don't need to have this on both sides. Let's delete half of it. Now, I think that there are people who know how to do this using Boolean modifiers, but every time I try and use Boolean modifiers in Blender, the whole damn thing explodes. So... like, I'll regularly crash Blender trying to use Boolean modifiers, so I appreciate anybody who can do that, but I haven't seen Blender actually support it. Well, there they are, slapping my door, because they are trying to get onto the roof, and my door is apparently the only place they can do that from. There we are. That's the shape I was going for. So that it will be where we'll put our support modules, right in there. We'll reshape the interior of that hole at some point, but right now we're just kind of sketching things, right? So with that in mind, what we need now is the folding frame for our ship. Since we're doing 60 degrees, we don't have any problems with needing to clone it or match it. We can just punch in the numbers and expand. So if we were to expand it to like that, you can see how that fits. But these would be in the wrong spot. So if we bring these in, they're supposed to be slightly embedded into the frame of the ship, like maybe here. And we will go ahead and work with that a little bit more aggressively later on. But you can see how my guesstimate on how large this ring needs to be is roughly correct. It's a lot larger than you might think, and that's just the nature of the beast. So if we are going to try to work with this, what we're going to want to do is have it swoop in here, and I think the best way to do that is to just grab this left-hand side, switch over to active elements, and select one of these, and then just -1 scale it, and then realize that we've got way too many selected. That's more like it. A little too much still, though. One more. There we go. That's more like it. So that could be our curve. And then we can soften this exact point that we have selected later on. But since we've got an exact curve, what we'll do is we'll delete here. And then we will just extrude. And we'll extrude straight back. And then we'll extrude. Probably should have done this. Yeah, something like that. Right, so that's how it's going to look, except for the small fact that we need to mirror it across the x-axis, like so. And this piece here and here, a little bit too notched. Oh, if I bevel them away, they break. That's not what I want then. Can I just dissolve them? Yeah, that'll do. And then what we'll do is that will be the point at which we add in the motivators. So if we wanted to figure out how this will look, what we can do is when we rotate it, it's going to end up like this if we rotate the whole thing as a single section. But in reality, what we're going to want to do is rotate it as two sections, so that both sides of it end up rotating, according to their own piece. So to reflect that, we will select half of this, and then we will punch it out as its own distinct object. And now when we rotate this, we can have it rotate down, and when we rotate this, we can have it rotate up. Obviously, that is gonna end up being silly because they rotate through each other, but you can get the idea as to what I'm trying to accomplish here. We don't actually want to rotate them up and down. I'm an idiot. We want to rotate them in and out. I don't know how I forgot that, but basically what we'll do is we're actually going to end up just select everything. Select one of the points in the middle here, like, say, that one. We're going to end up rotating them like this. Well, maybe not quite like that. There, no, that's... Trying to think of the right axis. I guess it's the 60-degree axis here. Yeah. So we want them to end up looking either like that, or like that. I think that looks better. Yeah, so what we'll do is when we're rotating them, we will rotate them to be this way. See? So what we're going to do is we're actually going to undo that and then duplicate it, and then we'll have one that's rotated and one that's not. Nope, that's backwards. There we are. Now we've got both of those, and that will be an easy way for us to remember what it's supposed to look like, because we're going to have to carve this central hull up to make that convincing. But you can sort of see the two shapes we've got. We've got this kind of fat 8, and then we've also got this kind of sleek, hooked shape. We could put engines on the hook shape, I suppose, but then we would have to have the... Oh, you know what? That's a much better idea. Fuck. Alright, let's go back to the drawing board for a bit. So if I bring this guy back over, welcome back. Make a really awful screeching noise. And then get out my art equipment again. It's humid today, so all the plastic in my office is squeaking. Alright, so I was having these free-floating engines, and I think that was the wrong idea, because these are actually going to be pretty nice. If we look at this ship from the side, it's shaped something like this, with a setup like this, right? So if we put engines, let's try that with the, there we are, it's more like that. If we put engines here, that makes a lot more sense, doesn't it? And we can hang them. Come on. We can hang them from heavy connectors like this, and then these can swivel, right? If it was a gunship, we could do it the opposite direction. Because there's no rule that says we can't have bracings within, so we could even then have a brace like this. And then here, this is where our warp elements go. That makes a lot more sense. But the question is whether or not it's going to look any good. So if we are going to just do a quick little sketch of it in warp mode, it's going to look like this. That shape is really hard for me to draw, but then what we've got these heavy beam connectors, and then the engine's out the back like this, right? And that means that the whole shape we had for adding on support elements is going to have to change, but that's fine. It would look like this. When it's, yeah, that's probably not bad. And then of course the support elements are here. I mean the warp shape elements are here. Let's go ahead and just try that. Let's try and make that a thing. Alright, so here is one of the shapes that we've got. Let's go ahead and delete the other one for now. We're also going to go ahead and remove the mirroring. The reason for that is because I actually want to do Alt-D there, and that way what we can do is we can do Alt-D and then we can rotate that object rather than rotating the mesh. The problem is that it's not at the right spot. So what we'll do is we'll delete it. We're going to take this guy over here and move him so that he's in the right location, so that this is butting right up against like that. And then what we'll do is we'll pull him back out. There you are. Alt-D, bring him over to the other side. I don't actually know how to multiply x-1, but I think I can just pop this open. Oh, it's actually nice and square at 2. That's a nice surprise. I did not intend for that to happen. And then we can scale x-1. And we can duplicate that, and then we can rotate 90. Is that the right shape? No, it's backwards. That's fine. Rotate -90. And we should be able to see all of the elements we create on the main frame also put over there. We're also going to do a shallow copy and stick it over there in case I screw up. So first things first, let's go ahead and put in the element for warp, just a placeholder for the element for warping, and that'll just be duplicate here and here. Shift D and then bring it in a little and then extrude it, and then we can scale it up on the y-axis. Oh, nope. There we are. And you can see that ends up creating a slightly distorted shape due to the way we did that, but for placeholder's sake, it's not bad. And then what we want to have is an engine in here that can swivel. So to do that, we're going to need a circle. Let's go ahead and create one. 128 is way too much. 32 is probably closer to what we need. And then we will just rotate X 90. No, you won't. Now you will. And we'll move this up into position here and get the shape to the right size, something like this. And that's going to be our main core hull size. And then we'll just kind of edit this there. And here we can just bring that in, scale it in, cap it off. The problem is that it's too close to the top, so we're going to drag it down like so, and then we're going to add in a heavy brace, and we'll do that using two techniques. We're going to extrude from both the top and the bottom. Two techniques, two elements, two operations. So there's the first half of our operation, and then here's the second half. Truth be told, that should be a circle. So we're going to duplicate this, stick it over here, and extrude up. Flip that. There we go. So that's a little bit too heavy for the heavy brace. Something like that's a little bit better. And you can see that what we're going to need to do is add in some beef. So let's do that. It is, in fact, what's for dinner. There we are. And we can always modify this per pixel. It's not like, or per vertex. It's not like this is the final version. We're just sketching right now. In this case, I don't think we actually have a point that's at the right spot to do this. That's fine. Good enough for now. And then what we can do is we can grab this whole shebang and duplicate it and drag it down. Flip it again. Wait, that didn't work. Median point. Flip it again, move it into place down here. Like that. And just as before, we're going to need to brace it, so just grab the faces we grabbed before here. And then again, inflate this part. That's fine. So now what we've got is a setup where we've got some engines attached to the frame itself. And as you can see over here, when they rotate, they end up pointing kind of catty corner, because that's not going to end up as a 90-degree angle. That's the only problem I've got with this. This way that it's kind of shooting off at an awkward angle. That's a 30-degree angle, because that's the angle that we get when we rotate a 60-degree object by 90 degrees on that axis. But it's not even... so basically, if we want to be able to do this, these engines have got to be able to rotate 30 degrees in order to make them square. See? And then they can rotate by 90 degrees. And what that means is that they really have to be their own gimbaled object rather than being baked into the engine, which is exactly what we'll do. But I want to just make sure that I have the sizes right before, we're just sketching at this point. I don't want to have something that doesn't end up working. But these are much too small, so we're going to just extrude them. And then we're going to want to move them. There we go. That's more the size I want. Even that's a little bit small. So let's go ahead and make them even bigger. All right, so basically, I think I can roll them out a little bit on this axis. Nope, that's what I want there. Here we are, like this. And then I can just bring them down like this and bring them up like this. And I will rebuild that edge with something that's nicer when it comes time to do so. Yeah, this is not bad. Let's go ahead and create a shallow duplicate. Delete this heavy duplicate. Grab that shallow duplicate, which I believe is that one. Yeah. And then we'll just rotate 90. Nope, negative 90. Nope. Rotate. Darn it. Rotate 90. And then we'll go in and we will do this rotation manually ourselves. Oh, we didn't flip it. That's what the problem is. Well, that's certainly not what I wanted. There we go. So once we've done that, we can come back inside here, grab these two nasty dudes, and rotate them along the y-axis by 30, like so. And then we can rotate them on the z-axis by 90, like so. And obviously they're no longer in the right spot, and that's not even... Hold on. Did I screw this up? Why aren't they pointed straight? Oh, of course they're not pointed straight. What is the angle they're pointed at? Is it this? No. Well, you know what? Let's go ahead and duplicate and then punch, grab and then eject, delete, and then move. They're going to be on a free rotating gimbal, so I'm not too worried about it. But I may not have actually rotated this correctly because they're not lining up in the way I thought they would. It's okay though, we'll figure it out later. The idea is this sketch going to work? Is this basic idea of a shape going to work? So oh, that didn't work. Oh. There. So that's what it'll look like when it is in cruise mode, when it's not trying to warp. And the question is, how can we make this feel fast? How can we make it feel faster than when you're... Well, to be honest... I like the shape. I'm trying to figure out the way to make it work. And to be honest, the way to make it work might be to... Well, no, I kind of like that. So if we take a look, the difference here is that the engines come in quite a bit when we're trying to go into warp mode. So that gives us a lot more maneuverability when we brace them out like that, because when they're outside, they have more x-axis thrust. But we do have a limitation in how far they can gimbal, because they can't afford to gimbal into each other or straight up, straight backwards. They have to be limited in their gimbal capability. But the question is, can I do something to make this more interesting without making it require complicated stuff? So it might be that I'm just thinking too hard about it, but I'm thinking if the bracing shape is substantially heavier, sorry, not the bracing shape, the warp shape is substantially heavier, that might help some. but it's not going to end up feeling... It feels very spindly. And I think that the only way to fix that is to simply have it braced. But the thing is, you can't brace something that's on a rotor. Obviously, that doesn't work out. Not unless you have like a very, very complicated double rotor setup. But what we can do is we can brace it. We can try and see how this works. We can brace it by literally just pulling elements straight back on the x-axis or y-axis like this, and creating a double rotor, a double pivot. Like so. The only problem is that will limit us in terms of how it works. Oh. What if this warp element was actually where the bracing came from? Would that work? Could we create a bracing? Like that. Not exactly like this, because this is ugly as hell. But the basic idea like this. Well, now it looks like an ordinary engine clamp. But the warp... So if we then moved it back into this shape, then it could... Nope. No, this is too complicated. It's going to end up too complicated. So let's think about this one more time. Maybe I should just not do something when I'm tired. Because I don't know why. I can't seem to make this shape feel right. It might simply be that this... So let's go ahead and undo that. It might simply be that this frame is simply too small. So if we were to just hide... If we were to make this frame like a really, really beast thick. To be honest, I think that does help. If we make the frame super heavy, when we go to do this portion here, what we could actually do is, if we switch this to connected mode and bring it in, like so. Well, let's change this to sharp. What we could do is we could punch a hole in it. And what that would mean is that we could end up just looping the warp element through the hull. In there, if you see what I'm saying. So if we do that, it's not exactly linear. We can fix that up, though. If we create it nice and thick like that, then we sort of create like a double loop. I don't know if you can see what I'm talking about, but there's like almost a circle here. And then when we rotate it back around, there would be, of course, that circle there. And you can see how that would sort of work out, but this would need to be straightened. I think that that's worth trying. I think it's worth... You know what? I might do it without the hinge. I might just create a ship that's got this shape to it. And then what I can do, if I want to warp, I can put the hinge here. That makes a whole lot more sense, doesn't it? In fact, if I do that, then I could actually take this whole thing and lever it out. Yeah, there we are, like that. Have the engine pointing straight back. Basically, I could invert the circle. Of course, I'm doing all of this with this thing, so let's delete that. That's not how it's going to work. We're going to need a new shape here, like an arrowhead. Yeah, so let's go ahead and work this out. We'll just go ahead and sketch it, I guess. Let's unhide all the crap that we hid. Delete half of it here. Come on. I'll move this stuff away for now. We'll delete it later. And the basic idea here is that we're going to want a nice organic shape. So the organic shape that we were using is great. Well, let's go ahead and just delete them. The organic shape that we were using is great, this 60-degree angle, but we need to be able to have a little bit more finesse to it. That's fine. So here's a cube. No, it's not in the right spot. Here's a circle. Here's a cube. And what we'll do is we will go ahead and pull that cube out to the side here and start to warp it into what we want to see. So now that cube is 1 meter thick, which makes it incredibly heavy. I'll make that 0.5. There we are. And then what we can do is make the whole thing tilted by rotating. But the problem is well, I guess it's fine. Rotate 60, like so. What we can do is we can then flatten, and we should end up with a 60-degree rhombus. Yay! Only problem is that extending this shape is a little bit risky, but it should be okay. So, because we're trying to get a curve, right? Do you think that sort of curve would be okay? I think that curve might be okay. In our previous shape, we had a different kind of curve. I think it's going to be fine, though. What we'll do is, can we pull this in? No, it ends up creating an awkward shape. I'm not really 100% sold on this yet. So if we were to grab this part and pull it out, and then push it back, we can get kind of an unusual heavy brace like this, right? And then what we'll do is we can create an engine for the top. So to do that, we'll just create a circle and rotate it by 90 degrees and bring it up and bring it over. And basically we're going to be putting that dot right in the middle there. And then we can go inside and start to do the work. What happened? There we are, something like that. Wow, that did not work out. And there we are. And then we can just, once again, duplicate and rotate and bring down, put in place, shrink, extrude, flip. There we go. And that will be our pivot. Something like that, right? And now, when we want to rotate the pivot, well, it's not on center. So let's try that one more time, but this time, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be pretty close. Yoink. So now when we rotate on the z-axis, you can see how that just kind of goes, woohoo! But is that how I want it? I don't think it is. I think what we actually want to do is move this back and then have this be a hoop. So to do that, we will grab this frame, duplicate it, scale it up, delete the inner portions. Boom. And then grab these, extrude them like so. Bring them back. Just the back faces, please. Oh, I can't really see what I'm doing. Too much topology work, not enough. I should really learn how to use booleans in Blender. Every time I try, it explodes and breaks, and it's just no fun. So we shall see if I can get that to work at some point. And we'll just grab here. Boom. Simple stuff, right? So if we do it like that, then what we can do is brace this along the middle here, and then brace this here. And just for a shape, we're going to want to extrude it even further. Now that it's no longer on center, it feels a little bit more natural. But what we really need to do is grab all of this crap. And there we go. Now the idea is that when we rotate this thing in 90 degrees, like so, we should be able to warp. So to allow that, we actually need to create a warp element right here. So to do that, I think what we'll do is extrude these out another step, and then create a nice hole in between. And we can extrude here, I guess, and then create the nice hole. Doesn't look like scaling's our friend, so we're going to just use loop slide. And then lastly, one more extrude and a shrink, which we'll again do by using loop slide. There you are. So the internal area here, we'll just grab one of these boxes, duplicate it, and then extrude it like so. And I think it's a little too big, so we'll just shrink it a little. And then pull this and this, just for the sake of having it set up as something that appears to be what it needs to be. Like so. So now, if we rotate on the z-axis and -90 it, this is what it'll look like when it is in cruise mode. And then when we want to warp, we can rotate it into warping mode. The only problem is that it's wider than the ship. So this is simply too big because it's crossing the 0 line. If we shrink it down like so, that should be a little bit better. There we are. I'm not actually sure whether or not this is a good ship design. In terms of being fun. It doesn't seem like it will be. Anyhow. Move it down here. And now what we've got is the same thing down below. And if we rotate them both on the z-axis 90 degrees, then it looks like this. And of course here, this guy needs to be moved out a little bit to make it right here. I'm sort of thinking that this isn't going to work. There's something wrong with my brain today. Sorry. Normally, I just need sleep is the problem. I can't do jack shit without sleep, whether it's design or anything else. Trying to come up with a way to make. So the problem is I'm overreaching. I'm trying to come up with a way to make like hinged, interesting ships, but in fact, I haven't even built the basic ships yet. I wanted to try and make a VTOL, or pseudo VTOL, but I don't think it's going to be possible until I understand the design language of this game a little bit better. I think I better try and make some basic ships first. I don't even have a warp ship built. The game, we're using short-range vessel, a puddle jumper. It's not even a puddle jumper that can land. It's the cheapest possible hull I can dock, but it can't go down to a planet or anything. So if I wanted to, I would be able to do some more designs that are not quite so fancy. I like this idea, this Fat 8. I might have to come back to it later. It doesn't require me to do any hinges if I do it that way, but it will limit the amount that those engines can rotate, because if these engines point straight up or straight down, they'll blast your warp nacelles off. Now the problem is that although they're small, those actually house a tremendous amount of force. They contain all of the mass variance that you take on as you enter warp speed. So they need to be really solidly braced, which is why I was thinking about how to do it. Originally, how to do it by moving the engines around, because the engines actually require less bracing than the warp elements. But let's just go ahead and take up another sketch. More squeaking, more sketching. Hooray. So, maybe what I need to do is do another episode where I just look at a crap ton of spaceships and talk about them for an hour. That sounds like it's more about my speed today. I really want to get Star Citizen, but I don't want to spend any money on it. I'm willing to buy the core game, but I want to look at spaceships, and I don't think you're allowed to look at the spaceships unless you spend like $60 real dollars on the spaceship. Not sure. I might go look into that. If they let me play around with the spaceships but not take them out into the universe, it would still be worth getting the game, because then I could just be like, this is the $120 ship that nobody can afford. Look at the design elements. But I really do enjoy the designs in that game. They have some very highly paid and accomplished ship designers, as much as I hate the actual game. Not interested in any of the shipping or shooting bits, and that's all the game is. So if we were trying to come up with a ship that can land, right? Our core problem is that we have a lot of modular elements that can make the ship longer or taller or whatever we decide they have to be. So if we wanted to create a ship capable of landing on a planet, we'd probably want to have wings that could allow for, flight elements, push that atmosphere around on atmosphered planets. We're going to want to have some engines that have intakes, as well as space engines, obviously. Something like that. And then we're going to want to have a cargo capacity, because for beginning game stuff, the idea here is you're going to be down on the planet taking on cargo. Now, in reality, of course, you don't want to have your cargo spaceships land horizontally. You want them to land vertically on their butt, because that way all of their engines are pointed straight down, and when it comes to taking off again, you can have a much heavier cargo load and still manage to reach space. But landing on your ass is extremely difficult, especially if you are a space plane. But what I'm thinking is, on the ground, maybe they have a lever, like the whole framework just kind of tips you on your butt so that you can fire off into space, right? And if that's the case, then they need attachment points to be able to do that, that crane lift. And we can use the same attachment points to facilitate our cargo. So if we're looking at it from the top, let's go ahead and say that we've got a ship that's shaped like this, right? Just a very, very rough shape. Something. And then what we can do is we can have like a U-loop. And then here are the engines. And then here is the cargo upright lift, which then segues into, I hate that word because it's not written that way, but then it segues into cargo space, right? A cargo cage, which is placed pretty much dead center in the ship. It goes straight through, so you can see through it. Like there's a guy on the other side going, "Hey, look at me." There's no, it's not on top of the ship or on the bottom of the ship. It's right smack dab in the middle, because that way you have a nice brace. Your engines are centered. And then at the end, we can either have this open so that you can access it from the back, or we can close it. Or we can close it with something that can be opened, right? But if we close it, something like this, what we can do is we can add on some kind of tail element, which can help to do the flight stuff, right? So what that ends up doing is having like an egg shape right in the middle of our plane that is hollow. And of course, as we're flying around, that causes all sorts of problems with air vortexes, but that's okay. We are playing a video game. So if we have this sort of shape, I think that that's iconic enough, interesting enough, strange enough that it could work pretty well. Any of you guys agree with me? I think I've got someone watching. If we continue to do that, then we can amplify it, right? We can have the shape kind of coil around like this. Our bridge can be here. And then what we can do is we can have interiors in here, so little windows, right? Problem is, where do we put our modular elements? Modular engine elements, not so bad. We can simply keep extending these engines backwards with the big fat modular elements. So as we do it, they'll be fatter. They won't just get longer. They'll be like this. I think that'll look fine. I don't have any problems with that. Our command elements are the part I'm not sure about, because I don't know where they would go that would not be easy to overload, because we're not using a ship that can be easily pushed forward or pulled backwards. The only thing I can think of is that this nose area here, maybe it can be just levered out and get steadily further and further away. But that's not going to end up looking very good, is it? It's going to end up... I mean, I guess it's okay. Yeah, let's try it. And then what we can do is we can have the support elements. We could have them here, just kind of going along the tip of the wing. But I like that the wing has some sharpness to it. So I think it makes more sense to put them somewhere else. I could put them in the cargo area, but then they would reduce your cargo space, right? But how about if I put them here, on the inside between the engines and the tail? So as you get more stuff, you get more ass heavy down here near the tail, and the tail can keep extending, so the tail doesn't have to get shorter. As you put more stuff in, the tail can get longer, just to adapt it. I think that that's a pretty good setup. AC Wraith says cat link, and Petro Silas Will Zachman says just lurking. Sorry, everybody just lurks. I don't very often get comments. The only problem with that is I'm never sure whether or not the numbers where it says someone's watching are in fact true. I don't know what cat link means. Oh, they're lurk emotes. Everybody's lurking. I am a lurk. Everybody likes to lurk. Nobody likes to talk. Yeah, so this is going to be largely a flat plane, but I do have to decide how it's going to connect with... let's go ahead and just do a quick sketch here. So there's some wing stuff, some engine stuff, and then we have to be able to land it like on landing gear. I think that the nose, as it comes out, will not go straight forward. It will get like a 30-degree or 15-degree bend to it, like this, right? So this is our command extension in area. And then we can have this bridge have... I don't think we want it to have a brace. I think we want the brace to be on the main body, right next to the heavy strut. This is the pin that we use to lift the ship and to lift heavy cargo in. So I think that on the underside of that, we could put in a leg, a landing leg. And then for the other landing legs, I think that we can have them come out from outside of the engine here. The problem is that we'll have to be careful about the modular elements and where that goes. We'll have to put it either near the front of the engine or near the back of the engine. I guess near the back of the engine makes more sense. So it would kind of land like this. These are landing legs. They're not actually their wheels. Because we don't have much in the way of vertical thrust. I'll probably put in some right here, but I wouldn't want to try and land off of it. All right, well, let's go ahead and try and make this instead of what I was doing before, because that did not work out. So let's see. Got that egg shape. I guess we'll start with the command area again, because that's something I know the size of. I'm like, yeah, command area is a specific size. Let's not delete the suns. We'll just move them to a different layer. Boom. Delete everything else, though. Okay, so if I want this command system to work, what it does is it wraps around, right? So that means that we don't have a multiple command beam like we have with some of the others. This is going to be a pretty small ship, so you can't really equip too many command elements. At most, you might be able to equip 2 of them. So when we create that cylinder and then shrink it and then rotate it, that's our placeholder. But again, it's actually going to be offset with a mirror. It's going to be a twinned setup, a twinned approach. But it doesn't have to be. So what I can do is I don't have to do it like that. I drew it like that, but in reality I can merge them together. There's no No, darn it. Turn clipping on, slap them together, and then delete the faces. I can do it like this. There's no reason not to. I only drew them twinned because in the back they have to be, but in the extension phase they don't have to be. What we do have to have is a secondary setup that will help us to keep this from getting too long. I think that what we're going to need is a half unit rather than a full unit. This means that each of these segments is quite thin, so we'll create some variants and we'll randomize them so that you always have something interesting to look at. In addition, though, these are straight, and I don't think we actually want them to be straight. I think we want them to be scooped, maybe like this. And the reason for that is simply because then it'll look better. So that's the sort of thing that we're going to end up creating. We'll just apply rotation and scale, and then we can duplicate it, and then grab y 0.5. That's 0.7. And you can see that lines up just fine. So later on we'll create another... Here we are. Later on we'll create another element that can brace across the top or the bottom. I haven't decided yet. Or maybe even on the outside. But for now, you know what? Actually, it would make sense if it was on the outside. But for now, let's work on the rest of this, which would be the way that it forks around in the back. We're going to just sketch that forking. So we'll just create a circle again. Rotate x 90. Scale 0.5. And then what we'll do is we'll just sketch how it's supposed to do its forking. And then we'll come back later and actually fill it in. Because this is not all exterior, so you won't be able to see most of it. Something like that. I guess we'll leave it inside out since it is more inside than outside. But if it is inside out, it's obviously a little too big. Now let's create the whole shape, just as the bridge shape, just as a quick sketch. I think that we'll do that using a cube that we bring forward and then edit. So if we do that, then we can always bring these... Oop, that didn't work. So the idea here is that this is not straight and flat. It's going to be something more like that. And similarly, even more like that. And similarly, although I've put these in as rotated, they are not rotated. Oh, it looks like I put the braces in as part of this object. No biggie, just delete the object. That's fine. There we are. So basically, these all need to be rotated in this direction, 10 degrees? 10 degrees. More like this. I'm not 100% sure that that's what we'll end up with in the long run, but that's much closer to what I want. And we're just kind of doodling along here. Yeah, that's more or less correct. Now let's create that egg shape in the middle. I don't think that these brace out nearly enough. So let's go ahead and grab and pull. Yeah, there's a lot more internal space than you might think. So the egg shape is going to be a container right here. We'll go ahead and start with a circle and make it 128. And then we'll pull it into position here. And then, of course, we can stretch it on whatever axis we prefer. It's not technically an egg shape at this point. It's oblong. The question is, I think I do want it to be an egg shape, but the question is, do I want it to be an egg shape that's thin at the front and fat at the back? I think so. If that's the case, what we'll do is we'll just grab this part here, turn on proportional editing, Make it a nice, smooth edit, and just scale it slightly. Boom. Now it's an egg shape. Now, folding this up and down so that it is the right size. Well, you know what? Let's go ahead and move these suckers down so that they're not offset. I want this to be at 0, 0, 0 because otherwise it's a real pain in the ass. This is the core portion of it, so it's not something we want to screw up. Is that 1? No, it's not. It's doing something funky here. That's fine. So this is 1 unit high on the interior of our ship. Now this is going to be perfectly mirrored, so let's go ahead and delete half of these. And add in a mirror. And from this, we can form the rough shape of our body. We don't have to do it just yet, but let's go ahead and put in a wing. So I think we're going to be, the wings are going to be part and parcel of this same object, but I think I want them to be different for now, just so that we can move them around freely. Once again, we'll add in a mirror, and we'll just try and get these wings to be in the right shape and the right size. Let's use edge editing, and then we can just pull this out. And once again, we're just sketching the shape into life. We're not trying to do too much. It might be that sketching the shape into life is what I'm bad at, and that's why I keep failing. But I think it's because I didn't get any sleep. Alright, so that's more like this. But the wings actually come around and close that circle. That circle ended up being quite a bit smaller than I wanted it to be, so let's go in and just scale it up. Scale it up on everything but the y-axis. The z-axis, I mean, one of those axes. There we are, that's more like the size I like. Even that's a little bit too... Is that... I think it's probably about right. It's just that the wing is too small now. That's just good. There we are. Better. So for the wing, we can close off this egg shape just by bracing it. But of course, we're not going to end up using this exact shape to do that. I just want to have it sketched in. So now the engines, which are going to be right along the wing here, they're also going to be circles to start with. And then we're going to just put them into place. I think these have way too many. Let's go ahead and try a circle that doesn't have quite so much heaviness to it. A 64 is better. There we are. We're going to end up only using maybe a quarter of the circle, something like that. But, you know. Wait, is that not in the middle anymore? I think I moved it. Oh, I moved it because the engines are not centered. Of course not. They're above and below the wing. But to be honest, we could just use like one circle to define both the top and the bottom engine. Let's give it a shot. So if we were to extrude this, this could be our engine, core engine framework. Something like that. And then what we can do is we can adjust this so that it feels more aerodynamic to brace around the eggshell, the egg shape that we've got. Obviously, we'll clean the shape up later if we ever finish this. But what we can do is just extrude this down and then grab both of these. Come on, you. There we are. And use a skew to bring that forward. Looks like we need to do a little bit more work than that. So let's go ahead and polish up some of these shapes. Well, we're definitely going to need to take a little bit more effort into making these shapes flow better, but you can see the idea here. Let's go ahead and add in that mirror modifier. There we go. And then obviously in the back here, we've got a bunch of engine add-ons and support add-ons for our setup. So to do those, we'll just create cylinders and then shrink by 0.5. And then rotate 90. So 1 wide is correct in terms of the green arrow thickness. But these might be too small on the other axes, which isn't too hard. We can just scale it up on the other axes. And then brace that in. And these are also going to have to be split, I think, in order to correctly... Well, maybe what we'll do is we'll have them like this. I'll think about the best way to brace it. Maybe these actually have an add-on like that, which ends up working pretty well when you duplicate them and shift them. You can't see it. And then we can have like a core engine frame. And the core engine frame would come out and then turn into like a jet. A heavy jet. With the idea being that you move the frame in and out as you need to. In this case, it looks like it's not going to work quite as well as it sometimes would, just because the thing actually shifts. That's not a big deal, though. We can always either repeat it or fake it. We can work that out later. But that's the basic idea. And then what we've got is on the other side, over here, there we are. This will be our support section where we add in our support modules. And those, I think, need to be a little smaller, like this. The wings are a little bit too up in this area. It's given me the wrong idea, so we'll just move them out. In the end, what we're going to do is we're going to create like a bulge here that runs all the way along. Might as well do that now. Basically, this top shape, I guess it's going to mirror. So let's go ahead and put on Z-axis mirroring and delete. There we go. It's not. I just grab this. We don't actually want to do the whole thing, but we can do the whole thing and then bring it back later. So that's what we'll do. So we push this up, and then we want to shrink it. But you can see how it shrinks away from the center point, so we have to manually adjust it back in. It turns out that's a little bit too much, so we'll just unshrink it for a second and shrink it less this time. And we don't want that much beef, so I'll just pull it up and then out. And they're once again hammering on my door. Like that. with the exception being that the actual front and back have a different setup. This perfect little ring, it's not very perfect actually, we did some grumpy stuff to it here, but this ring is not the stadium shape that it's actually going to be. It's going to taper off in the front and the back rather more precipitously. So to reflect that, we can just grab and delete. There we are. And that's obviously just a very rough indication. It's not actually how it's going to look. But it is the shape that I'm trying for. Now, of course, the wings ended up being much too flat, so we're going to have to modify that. Yeah, something like that. And you can see how heavy the rest of this ship is compared to this tiny little area where the command modules go. That might be a mistake. Maybe I want to shrink everything but the command modules down just a little bit. Let's give that a shot. Yeah, I think that probably is a little bit better. Yeah, something like that. Even that's a little bit. Yeah, that's probably best. The intakes have been damaged a little bit. They're inside of this hull. So that's obviously not going to fly. So we're going to need to just cut back on that portion. So we'll just hide this. And then delete this. And then unhide it. And that'll give us a little bit more freedom to shape this front end so that the modules don't screw up. Now, I've done all of this using just a rough sketching topology. I'm not sure about the best way to convert this over into a final topology. I'd like to use like, Boolean operators and shit, but I guess I can try that. But first, let's go ahead, before anything dies and crashes, let's go ahead and add in the tail. So basically, the tail just comes back like this. And obviously we can add in just a little bit of fin sort of things just to see, you know, that doesn't look too terrible. As a sketch goes, I think this has a lot of potential. I'm not too worried about it. Problem with it is that the actual modular elements that you'll be adding to the ship are going to be relatively small. They're not a substantial portion of the ship. I'm not sure if that's going to be great, but I think that there's no way around that because this is aerospace. You can't just distort it too much or it stops looking like it can fly. So I think that we have to put up with the idea that it's going to be a relatively limited level of modification. I mean, I could try and shrink some of this stuff down. Like I could shrink these elements. That's not too bad. And then I can just take these guys. Did I shrink them right? Hold on. And then these. Nope. Unselect. There. This will make it a lot more noticeable. So I think that's probably a better idea, even though it radically reduces the amount of storage on the plane. We can also pull this back just a notch. There we are. We'll work on that, figure out the exact place I want that stuff to be. But for now, what I'd like to do is grab all of this and move it off to the side a little bit. And we're going to try and do a little bit of Boolean modification stuff, just because I think that it's not going to work. I think it's going to just die. A horrible, horrible death. So to do that, what we'll do is we'll start with the circle, which is going to have to be a pretty good one, like 256. Start with a circle, and then we can expand that. And this is going to be the egg-shaped hull in the middle, right? But what we're going to do is we're going to have one shape to subtract out and one shape to add in, right? So the additive shape, the sun has just started shining straight into my face, so we might be coming up towards the end of the stream here. So the additive shape would have to be a positive, and the negative shape the other way around, which, duh, right? But that's, not too bad. We'll go ahead and just sketch it, and then we'll sketch a Booleanized version, and we'll see what happens. So there's the positive one. I can duplicate that and make it into the negative one by shrinking it on everything but the z-axis, like so. And then what we're also going to have to do is invert the interior here. So if I do that, then what it should do is, if I do this as a Boolean, and I want to select the other one, and I want to do a difference, is that going to work, or is it going to be bullshit? I actually can't even tell if this is the right one, because what I'll do is I'll make this render in just wireframe, so that I'll be able to see whether or not we're getting the right result. But unfortunately, it doesn't look like we are. I mean, let's go ahead and just scale this up. Okay, so the problem was that it mathematically wasn't working out. But you can see that we've got a lot of damage happening. Just a ridiculous chaff. I wonder whether or not that's because of the mirror. If we go in here while we're doing this work and we delete this loop, maybe that's why. Remove doubles. What's going on? I told you to remove doubles. These are... Why can't I select this? What the fuck is this? I don't see any reason why these can't be loop selected. How is this not a loop? That's a goddamn loop. There's nothing special about it that should make it unselectable. I guess I can just... Boom. That was weird. What's going on? This is weird. Well, clearly there was something wrong with the topology, but I have no idea how. There. Happy? Alright, so that's a lot less damaged. if I look at it, there's no longer any weird cutting in the middle. So let's go ahead and add in some add-ons. Let's start with the tail. So if we were to create the tail, we could just shape it up properly. So just move it here. And then pull back this. And then shrink it on x-axis. Cut. Shrink it on the x-axis again. Shrink it on the z-axis. Bring it up. Extrude and shrink and push just to see if that works. So then what we can do is we can say, hey Boolean, can we duplicate this, or do I have to grab it again? I guess I have to grab it again. I know that there are some toolkits that actually do this much better, but I've never bothered to get them because the problem is that every time I try to get them, every time I try to do Boolean, eventually Blender just dies and explodes violently. Like it'll actually crash. So I'm like, well, I don't want to try and learn a new interface that will just end up not working. But if maybe this version is more stable, I'm not sure. Anyway, here you can see that it does seem to be pretty stable. Let's go ahead and create a version of this that we can just ditch. So to do that, we'll just grab this bad boy and apply, and let's just see what it's like. Let's delete this. Delete that. There we are. So this is what it looks like once we've merged. And there are some problems with it. It's not too bad though. This is certainly not as bad as some of the other stuff I've seen. But there's stuff like a floating face that doesn't exist. Okay, so there's definitely some cleanup that's needed. We've got a variety of either floating points or floating faces. I think they're floating faces, but I can't see them. I'm not sure where they are. Oh, I see. Those are just the center points of egregiously bad faces. But I can always just delete these. And then we can bridge the edge loops. Which is what I did originally. Maybe if I used a different... Here you can see what's going on. What's it like on the inside there? Okay, so it did cut, but it creates these really nasty n-gons. Those are going to actually error out in Unity. Let's go ahead and undo. There we are. So if we take a look inside, you can see that I do in fact have just a flat surface here, which is why we had a flat surface afterwards. So that's perfectly fine. But I can't allow for those kinds of brutal n-gons. I could add a triangulate modifier, but that's not what I want either. I just want a pretty face modifier, which I don't believe exists. I certainly don't see one. Well, what happens if I change these from B-mesh to carve? What did B-mesh have more options? It did. Let's try carve, just to see what happens. So now that I've carved, you can see that it has a very, very different and non-mirrored version. But it still has the same n-gon problem. This won't render in Unity. This face here is just going to die in Unity. But this isn't a critical issue. I can fix this at least a little. Let's keep working on it. Let's see how far I can take it before my voice gives out. So this wing element, we're going to make our own new wing element. What I've been doing so far is I've been taking these and making them render as wireframe. That's not actually what I want to do. I want them to be solid, but I also want them to be on layer 2. There we are. That way I can flip over to layer 2 and see what I'm working on. And what we're going to do now is select both layers, but we're going to create the wings, and I think that I want to create them on layer 2. So once again, we'll start with the cubes. What was that? Boolean grease cut? Whoa, I don't even know what that stuff was, but Blender has so many features that nobody bothers to explain or show. Once again, we're going to need to do a mirror modifier here. And then we'll come back over into the main. Why can't I see? Oh, there we are. Just select this, a new Boolean. I'm sure that there is a better way to do this. This is like 1980s tech. There we are, union. If we take a look just at the one layer, you can see that it's been added in just fine. But what we want to do is, of course, create this so that it is wings. So we'll just move it, and then we'll cut it and extrude it and stuff. So now, at this point, what we have is wings that are perfectly flat, which is obviously dumb. It's not how wings work. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn on clipping, and then turn on Z-axis mirroring, and then lift the whole thing. And then we're going to look at it, and then we're going to... Why is that top layer not flat? I'm going to flatten it, and then we're going to screw with it. There we are. That's better. Much better. It's still a little too fat, though, so let's go ahead and bring down this part. Unfortunately, since it's not perfectly flat, we'll go ahead and make it flat. And then we're going to have to make it flat again. Good enough, I guess. So then we can just... The thing is that I wanted to cut... I cut this badly. No, can't do it anymore? Okay, fine. You are garbage. Go away. So basically, I screwed that up. My bad. Let's try one more time. Now, this is the sticky point. That'll be good enough for now, I guess. I actually have very little experience modeling wings, which is why I have a hard time with it. There we go. Good enough for now. If we take a look at how that looks in the main view, you can see that it didn't update. That's odd. There we are. Just hit tab twice and it'll update for us. You can see the wings are a little off-center. There's a couple of small details that I'd like to fix. So what we're going to do is move the wings in so that they're not off-center, not out so much, and then we'll move them back just a touch like this. And what we can do is add in a body element. There are a couple of ways to do that. probably the easiest way is to extend the main core shape rather than creating a new core shape and moving it in, just because this main core shape is, in fact, pretty much exactly what we want. It's just that it's not in the right spot. Is that centered? Yeah. Okay, good. So now if we just look at layer 1, you can see that what we've got is a shape that doesn't look too shabby. We've got a ton of n-gon problems, which we're going to have to sort out. What I might do is do things like remove the wings from this equation and then put them back in. But the basic idea is sound. When we come up to the front, we have a sudden dip, but that's not part of the same framework. That's a separate object. What we do have to do is get ready for the dip. And to do that, what we're going to want to do is just scale. What do you think? I actually think that turned out okay. How odd. Only problem is we're going to have a hell of a time with this portion here. But that's okay. We can always edit, do some reskinning later on. Now, the main intakes are part of this setup, so let's go ahead and see what we can do for creating the main intakes. We'll start with a circle. That's got too many points. We'll start with a smaller circle. And once again, oh, that's not where I wanted to go. Once again, we'll extrude straight back. And then we'll just see what happens, because I have no idea what happens when you try and add in a an object that is open-ended. We shall see. Why is that called there? That's better. So if we take a look, it just adds it in, it looks like. It doesn't seem to be a problem. Hooray. But it is a problem in that it's a little bit off-center? How did it get to be off-center? Oh, no, wait. It is a problem. The B-mesh is weighting it differently on the left and the right, as you can see. And that's just dumb. I don't think it's off-center. No, it's definitely not. And the B-mesh formula does not like open-ended meshes. It treats them differently on one side of the x-axis and the other. But that's okay. We can manipulate this to be correct. For starters, it's just too close to our interior. But we also need to have this have an intake. So what we'll do is we'll extrude, bring forward, and then tilt. And then we'll extrude and bring down. And normally I could just bring straight in, but what I want to do is actually split it and then make it so the split yeah, that's fine. Just bridge edge loops and then cut and then scale. And the reason for that is simply because there are, in fact, two of these, one on top and one on bottom. Or to back that up, what we're going to do is we're going to turn on Z mirroring and lift the top like that. And then we'll delete everything down here. The wing will need a little bit of work because it's obviously not quite set up right for this. But the basic idea is that this will then come in like so. And then we can close it. And here in the back, we'll go ahead and just close that off too, just to see whether or not it seems to be okay. And then here we've got an issue where I really want this to be a cut line. I could try and cut it all the way across, but it's almost easier just to recreate the wing. For now, let's go ahead and just grab this interior bracing here and move it here. And then we can extrude it in. Over back here, we can extrude straight across. But in here, what we need to do is extrude with a divot. But I don't want to just divot it. What I want is this guy to be forward like this. And then what I'll do is here we'll extrude straight in. And we'll sync up the front and rear elements there. And then this part is the part where we need to have the scoop. So to scoop, what I'll do is I will do a cut. I don't want to, well, I guess I do want to cut through the whole thing, so that's okay, I guess. I'll bevel here. Wait, isn't this Z-mirrored? It is Z-mirrored. If it's Z-mirrored, then why is there so much stuff below the perimeter? Who made this wing? They were an idiot. There we are. Still need to cut, though. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to we're going to merge these two elements, bridge the edge loops, and then, oh, I bridged the wrong ones. Try again. And then we're going to make sure there's no face here. Don't need it. And then we're going to just make this front edge work. And we can bring this up as well. Well, I guess we can't. Not easily. Just cut. Yeah, something like that. Just to create some density to the wing. And the last thing we could do is we could cut all the way across and try and make this into a nice curve, but I guess we'll just half-ass it. Congratulations, you're half-assed. Pull this in. We'll have to do, obviously, some more work on that, but the basic idea is sound. We return to the first layer and then just do this. You can see how that looks. We end up with choking on the hull here, but that hull is core body shape, so if we wanted to, we could change that, or we could change it later. I'm actually having a pretty good time with the Boolean editing. I think that they fixed it. I haven't seen any of the problems I was seeing before. I have seen a couple of issues where it doesn't mirror correctly, but if I was doing this properly, the base mesh would be mirrored, not every subsequent mesh. So I did it this way just because I was having some problems initially. I'm still going to have problems because this is going to end up producing a lot of screwy faces. But it's not going to be that bad. It's going to certainly be something I can work with. So I think it's probably worth continuing to try and use Boolean modeling, but I think that that would be better to do off-screen. I don't think that there is much of a call to try and do it on screen, unless you guys really want me to try and learn a new skill while everybody's watching, which seems like a poor idea, but I'm open to suggestions. If you are good at Boolean modeling in Blender and want to give me some tips, please do. Because this is something where I've had fun with a couple of Boolean modeling systems before, but Blender's Boolean modeling has never lasted this long for me. It has always errored out every single time that I've tried to use it in the past, and so I'm shocked that it's behaving this well. Maybe it's because I'm not doing a base mirroring on the base object. I suppose I'll know for sure when I try and redo this same setup with mirror modeling on the base object. I'm coming up towards the end because my voice is going. I don't know if you can hear that, but I can. Let me know if you have any questions at this last second here. See, here's the sort of issue that I had, but that's That's actually my fault. I forgot to fix that. It has nothing to do with the Boolean operators and everything to do with the human operators. There we are. Well, there we go. So, yeah, this is actually going to be fun. Boolean, the ability to use Boolean operators is a big get. Alan Wyvern says he arrived just at the end as usual. Yeah, I doubt that you're real familiar with Boolean operators in Blender, but if you are, feel free to chime in. So I know that there are a couple of libraries to help you do Boolean modifiers, and I'll look into those and play with them. I'm not 100% sure how much I'll be doing it on screen as opposed to off screen. There are a lot of things that I have to do off screen at this point. I have to program the algorithm for setting up the context engine, and I'm going to do that off screen. And I think that has a higher priority than learning how to do Boolean modeling. But on the other hand, Boolean modeling, once I've learned how to do it, I can Boolean model on screen, and that'll be fun for people to watch. More fun than watching me try and code an algorithm that I don't fully understand yet. Anyway, thanks for your time, everybody. Oh, Reaganomicon says, "Is this new magical right-click is nope, this is the old one. The reason it's the old one is because the new one, I don't believe, has automatic FBX export to Unity yet. Meaning that if I were to use the new one, I would have to constantly be re-exporting my FBXs. And since the default export works great for me, I don't see any reason to do that. But of course, if it turns out that the only Boolean libraries that work are all on 2.8, I'll probably have to upgrade, because Boolean operating to create ships is so much better than creating them out of sketches like I was doing earlier. So that is that. I've been streaming for 2.5 hours, and my viewer count has gone up. So I guess the sweet spot is anything longer than an hour, you idiot. But unfortunately, my voice can't really do that. You can already hear it going. So hopefully I'll see you folks on Wednesday. I don't have any more ongoing Let's Plays on my channel. I finished with the Heaven's Vault one. But I'll see whether or not I can publish some more gameplay analysis videos, because there's a bunch of meat there. I actually have a bunch recorded that I'm not. What's this? What does that mean? Why is it counting at me? Why is it cycling like this? What is that? What the heck does that mean? Oh well. How much fun. I'll see you folks later. Hope you enjoy your day.